You feel it, don't you? A subtle disquiet, a nagging sense that something is off. Even after ticking off every goal, the job, the house, the relationships, the material comforts, something essential still seems absent. A life that should feel full instead rings hollow. You chase new thrills, new things, more content, hoping to fill the void. But it lingers. This isn't just in your head, and you're not alone. What you're sensing isn't simply dissatisfaction with modern life. It's the structure of a psychological trap, one engineered not only to influence your behavior, but to infiltrate your very consciousness. Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung foresaw this nearly a century ago, but much of his most unsettling wisdom has been deliberately buried. Jung realized that modern systems don't just bind us with obvious limitations like economic needs. They implant mental frameworks that blind us to the deeper layers of our own imprisonment, and worse, cut us off from the deeper regions of our minds. We're quick to recognize political and economic control, but we often miss the subtler, more insidious mechanisms that hijack attention and suppress what Jung called individuation, the psychological journey toward true selfhood. This ignorance is not random. It's the foundation of an advanced system of control, one that doesn't chain the body but captures the mind. Jung's work exposes a disturbing reality. You haven't just been taught to buy and obey. You've been trained not to think, not to question, and above all, not to become fully aware. The most powerful chains aren't the ones you can see. They're the ones that bind your thoughts, not your limbs. This is the architecture of psychological domination. To break out, we must first understand how the trap was built. Jung's ideas on psychological control weren't about simple propaganda. He identified a much deeper force, the collective consciousness, a set of shared beliefs, assumptions, and values that get absorbed unconsciously. As Jung warned, people don't have ideas, ideas have people. What feels like your own thinking is often just a reflection of internalized programming. The trap begins when you identify completely with a self-image crafted by society, not by your own truth. Jung saw several tightly linked mechanisms that together form a cage for the psyche. The first is the suppression of the unconscious. Modern culture elevates logic and reason while treating the unconscious as irrational or irrelevant. But Jung found the unconscious isn't just a bin for repressed fears. It's a wellspring of energy, wisdom, and creative potential. Cutting us off from it keeps us operating at partial capacity. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." This explains why so many people feel pushed down paths they never chose. The unconscious doesn't vanish when ignored. It acts independently, often aligning with social norms instead of inner truth. The second mechanism is persona enforcement. The persona is the mask we wear in society. Necessary, yes, but dangerous when over-identified with. Today's world demands intense conformity to specific roles: the career identity, the consumer identity, the social media persona. Each comes with silent rules, shaping how we behave and even how we think. Unlike brutal oppression that sparks rebellion, this control works through reward and mild punishment. The well-adapted get praise, money, belonging. The non-conformers face loneliness, instability, and emotional discomfort. The system doesn't need violence. It just makes authenticity feel too costly. The third mechanism is attention fragmentation. Jung stressed the role of focused attention in developing consciousness. He called it the culture of the mind. But modern systems scatter attention through endless pings, notifications, tasks, and obligations. This is more than distraction. It's a block against the conditions necessary for inner depth. Digital overstimulation, overwork, and social performance keep us too busy to reflect. Without that space, authentic growth becomes nearly impossible. The fourth, and most subtle, is the colonization of imagination. Jung believed the deepest question anyone can ask is, what myth am I living? But today, myths are handed to us. Success is defined as wealth, happiness as consumption, progress as technology. These aren't just stories, they're invisible, walls that limit what we believe is possible. By internalizing these cultural myths, we trap ourselves within manufactured dreams. Our goals are shaped by systems that benefit from our compliance, not by visions that nurture human potential. Let's turn to education, perhaps the most powerful tool of unconscious programming. Why does school often feel lifeless, even suffocating? Jung offers an answer. What proved worth knowing for 30 generations, he said, must also be worth knowing for the 31st. But the real issue isn't old content, it's the intent of the system. Modern education doesn't aim to awaken consciousness, it seeks to constrain it. From early on, children are trained to value external judgment over internal understanding. Tests, rankings, rewards, they all teach that learning is about performance, not meaning. This isn't an accidental flaw, it's the point. Authentic learning, Jung believed, must engage the full self, thought, feeling, intuition, even the unconscious. Knowledge, he wrote, rests not upon truth alone, but upon error also. Yet schools push a sterile version of knowledge, a lifeless pile of facts to be memorized, not experienced. Even the ability to question is stunted. Sure, students are praised for being critical thinkers, but only within safe limits. Question the system itself, and you'll face pushback. Ask too many real questions, and you're labeled a problem. Even more troubling is how schools teach obedience. The structure itself, the schedules, the hierarchy, the surveillance, conditions young minds to accept external control as normal. Jung would call this psychic conditioning. It primes children to seek authority outside themselves, rather than develop internal guidance. The result is not just gaps in knowledge, it's a fractured consciousness. Graduates emerge prepared for tasks, but not for life. They may have technical skills, but lack the psychological integration needed for true individuation. Now consider media, the great engine of distraction. Jung never saw smartphones or YouTube, but he understood the danger of mass communication. He wrote, "Mass man is a thoughtless and unfeeling creature, always the prey of propaganda." Today's media environment has perfected the trap. It doesn't just fill your time, it rewires your brain. Constant content switching splits attention. Algorithm-driven dopamine hits lock you into compulsive scrolling. Outrage-driven headlines keep emotions in a loop of activation without resolution. This isn't just entertainment. It's engineered disconnection. A psychological state Jung would see as perpetual stimulation without integration. And that serves a purpose. To be normal, Jung said, is the ideal of the unsuccessful. In other words, the average person has adapted to a sick world by becoming numb to it. That numbness isn't peace. It's a symptom of suppressed awareness. Modern digital environments do more than just entertain or inform. They condition how we think and who we become. They normalize scattered attention, preventing the kind of deep focus necessary for real psychological development. But perhaps even more concerning is how they shape our perception itself. Through algorithmic curation, they generate what Carl Jung might have called a technological collective unconscious, a shared reservoir of symbols, assumptions, and emotional triggers operating beneath awareness. This doesn't just influence the content we consume, it reshapes the structure of thought itself. The illusion of endless choice hides the reality of a tightly limited psychological range. Freedom, as Jung noted, extends only as far as our consciousness allows. By filling our awareness with carefully selected distractions, these systems obscure the fact that our freedom is being managed. Social media plays a central role in this dynamic. Jung would immediately recognize its role in externalizing self-worth. The dopamine loop of likes, shares, and comments trains us to seek validation outside ourselves, reinforcing the ego and undermining the deeper self. This is the exact opposite of what Jung saw as necessary for individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are. Instead of turning inward, we become obsessed with external metrics, comparing ourselves to curated lives and reacting to shallow signals of approval or rejection. Consumer culture furthers this illusion by presenting itself as a path to fulfillment. But Jung understood that authentic psychological growth requires confrontation with the shadow, the disowned, uncomfortable parts of the self, and eventual integration into the self, the organizing totality of the psyche. Consumerism replaces this inner work with an endless cycle of desire, purchase, fleeting satisfaction, and renewed craving. People will do anything, Jung observed, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. Products are no longer just tools. They're marketed as extensions of identity, emotional band-aids, and symbols of transformation. Advertising appropriates the language of psychology, confidence, belonging, meaning, but offers only superficial substitutes. The result is a projection of genuine inner needs onto external objects, keeping us trapped in the belief that fulfillment lies outside ourselves. This system is especially insidious because it contains its own form of recovery. When consumption fails to satisfy, it offers more consumption as the solution. Wellness trends, minimalism, conscious consumerism, they all acknowledge dissatisfaction, while keeping us inside the same structure. What makes it work is that the effects are real. The brief dopamine hit, the social boost, the distraction, but they remain inadequate substitutes for the deep satisfaction of real psychological development. Work, culture too hijacks our inner energy. Jung understood that the psyche naturally moves toward wholeness and meaning, but modern labor systems redirect that energy into narrow professional channels, crafted not for individual growth, but for institutional maintenance. The most terrifying thing, Jung said, is to accept oneself completely. And work provides a socially sanctioned way to avoid that. You can define yourself through productivity, status, and function, never needing to ask who you really are. Our need for growth and contribution is displaced onto performance metrics and hierarchical progress. Professional achievement becomes a substitute for personal transformation. This displacement is reinforced by how society rewards one and dismisses the other. Real psychological work, quiet, difficult, and often invisible, is seen as indulgent or impractical. Meanwhile, visible success is celebrated. Modern work blurs all boundaries. Availability is constant. Identity merges with output. Social ties become networking. Even the language of personal fulfillment, find your passion, make an impact, is co-opted to serve organizational goals. Jung would see this as a confusion between true individuation and institutional adaptation. Jung's insights also extended into collective behavior. He warned about mass formation, the psychological process by which individuals dissolve into collective identities. The larger the group, he said, the smaller the individual. Modern political systems exploit this, encouraging psychological surrender, not through force, but through emotion. Participation, mystique, he called it, a blending of personal identity into the group unconscious. Political movements, ideologies, national identities, all offer relief from isolation and ambiguity by offering belonging and certainty. But this doesn't feel like loss. It feels like purpose. Information environments intensify the effect. Constant outrage, crisis headlines, and simplified moral binaries create a regressive mental state. Thinking becomes reacting. Nuance disappears. These movements often arise not from conspiracy, but from the natural collision between system incentives and psychological vulnerability. People longing for meaning, overwhelmed by chaos, surrender to the clarity of collective identities. But Jung insisted, authentic political engagement requires conscious individuals, not tribal instincts. Where love rules, there is no will to power. Where power dominates, love is absent. At the root of much of this dysfunction is the decline of symbolic thinking. Jung saw symbols not as decoration, but as vital tools for integration. They are how the conscious and unconscious communicate. Yet modern systems suppress this capacity. Education emphasizes data over meaning. Media delivers shallow stories. Work measures output, not depth. Language is reduced to function. Time becomes too scarce for contemplation. Symbolic poverty, Jung would call it. Without symbols, we lose access to the unconscious. We lose the tools for self-understanding. The result is a fragmented psyche, vulnerable to external control. This symbolic collapse affects more than individuals. Cultures too suffer when their symbols die. A people's vision perishes when their myths lose meaning, Jung observed. And in the vacuum left behind, new symbols arise, not from soul, but from commerce, politics, and screens. Jung recognized that the religious impulse, the drive for transcendence and meaning, never disappears. It just redirects. Man cannot stand a meaningless life, he said. So the system offers substitutes. Consumption as spirituality, tech as salvation, celebrity as divinity, politics as morality. These channels capture religious energy, but they do not transform. They simulate fulfillment, keeping the search going, never arriving. This is the final trap, not suppression, but substitution. The psyche moves in circles, always seeking, never finding. But Jung offered an alternative. Not rebellion, but the quiet, radical work of individuation, the process of becoming your true self. The privilege of a lifetime, he said, is to become who you truly are. That begins not with fighting the system, but with turning inward, listening to the psyche's voice. The first step is making the unconscious conscious, recognizing patterns, inherited roles, programmed desires. This awareness leads to differentiation, separating your own values from collective norms. It's not withdrawal, it's emergence. It's developing a self that can engage the world, not be consumed by it. Next comes the reclamation of projection, pulling back the parts of ourselves we've cast onto others, especially the shadow, the traits we deny, the darkness we fear. Jung reminded us, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Finally, individuation reconnects us with the symbolic. Through dreams, creativity, synchronicity, and myth, we restore the bridge between our conscious lives and the deeper layers of soul. This is not just a personal transformation, it's a political one. Jung believed the purpose of life was to kindle a light in the darkness of mere being. And that light, consciousness, disrupts control. Marketing loses its grip when desires are reclaimed. Social pressure fades when you know your own values. Political manipulation fails when you own your shadow instead of projecting it. Most of all, authority shifts. No longer external, but internal. What Jung called inner authority, the ability to navigate life by the compass of an integrated self. This doesn't lead to selfishness. It leads to authentic contribution. Jung said the achievement of personality means the fullest development of the individual. And such individuals don't conform. They create. They bring new consciousness into culture. The salvation of the world, he wrote, lies in the salvation of the individual soul. Each person who undergoes this journey sends ripples through the collective. They are not products of the system. They are its transformation, and so you face a choice, one most people never realize exists. You can live within the psychological frameworks handed to you, chasing goals that aren't truly yours, defining yourself by measures that were never meant to free you, seeking meaning in places that cannot offer it. This path is familiar, comfortable, but it leads to quiet discontent, a life misaligned with your soul. Or you can choose the harder way, the path of consciousness. Recognizing, programming, reclaiming projection, developing symbolic vision, listening to the voice within. As Jung said, I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. The systems surrounding you are real, vast, and refined over decades, but so is your capacity to outgrow them. The journey begins with a shift in attention, from external authority to the inner depths of your own psyche. Not to escape reality, but to re-enter it, fully conscious, fully human, fully yourself. In a world built to keep you unaware, the most radical act is simply to wake up.